There we go, we're live. Hi everyone. Very happy to introduce Anna McPartlin, who I can already tell is going to be a great interview. Start us off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your books.
Hi everyone. My name is Anna, and I've been writing since I think I got my first book deal in 2006. So I've been writing about 20 years, and this is my first crime book. So I was doing fiction, and then I got into TV, and I started doing crime for TV. I started off with Holby City, knocked out a couple of Holby cities, and then I got my first big gig on a crime TV show, and I absolutely loved it. And then I was doing a podcast with a friend of mine about Irish authors called What's in the Water. And it was during that we were highlighting some crime novelists. Liz Nugent was one of them. And we were chatting about it, and we started talking about a time in Ireland when we all grew up in the 80s. And we were talking about the amount of writers in Ireland, but specifically the amount of crime writers. And that particular time in Ireland was a really difficult time. And we were kind of way behind you in the UK. And there was a lot of misogyny, there was a lot of patriarchy. The Catholic Church had a real grip on society. And there was a couple of murders, well, a good few murders that occurred of women and children that were never solved. And we realized through talking about it on the podcast how profoundly it had affected us. And as growing up, as teenage girls growing up. And I couldn't stop thinking about it after we did the podcast. And then this character came to mind, and there was a particular case in Kerry when I was growing up. Baby John, a real baby, was found dead on a beach in Kerry, and there was a hunt for the mother of the child. And what happened was an absolute travesty of justice. And because of the patriarchy, because of the misogyny, because of the way women were treated in the country, it became a witch hunt. And basically, every woman that was pregnant at the time was checked, and one woman was found not to be pregnant when there was a rumor that she'd been pregnant before. And because she wasn't married, they went for her and her family. And they brought her family in. They were a family of farmers, and they brought her family in to be questioned. And at the time, they literally beat the living shit out of them. And they elicited a confession. And it turned out afterwards that the girl had given birth a stillborn baby on her farm at the time. And later, our guards tried to say that she was pregnant with two babies. And that she had been with two different men, and that accounted for the blood, for the blood, the blood being different. And basically, it was a complete and utter shit show. It was a disgrace, and still to this day, I get furious, and so do people I grew up with, how she was treated, and how they tried to create this story around this poor girl. And in the end, they couldn't make it stick. Of course they couldn't. It was so ridiculous. But as a result, the murderer was never found, baby John. And that's what they called him, John Doe, little baby John. And nobody has ever been held accountable for his loss. And they lost the opportunity to find out what happened to that little boy because of the way they treated that young lady. And I thought, what a brilliant premise to start a book and to inject a guard, a young Irish woman. And there would have been only a handful of Irish women at the time as guards. And I thought, what would have happened if there had been a woman there? How would it have ended up differently? And that's, I suppose, the premise of the Mary Shea murders, is would these murders that happened in Ireland and these miscarriages of justice have happened? And of course, I'm going to say, no, they wouldn't, because women are brilliant. But So that's the premise for the Mary Shea murders, and that the first, the Silent Ones, is that's the premise.
We've got some hellos already. So Leslie said hello. Laura Hamilton's, who's a fantastic champion of Irish authors, said, "Oh, it's Anna McPartlin who wrote the Rabbit Haze books. How fab!"
Yes, yes, that's
And
right. That's right. Yeah. So from Rabbit Haze to Mary Shea.
Donna has said hello as well.
Hi, Donna.
So this is my first introduction to your writing, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a fabulous book.
Oh,
Once I was
thank you.
into it, I was like fully in, if you know what I mean. But I can imagine with what it's about, and like you were saying, it's based on a real case, and you can see how passionate you are about it. But what are the people's like responses like reading it? Because it's a very emotive subject, isn't it? You've chosen to write
Well,
about.
it's really interesting because one of the things when you write a book, it's not like it used to be where you just write and you do what you want and you hand it over. Now it's like, oh, well, we need to talk to marketing. We need to talk and see whether or not people will be interested in this. And it goes through these various stages. And I remember when I said that I wanted to do this story, and as you picked up, I am really passionate about it. I do think about that little baby all the time, and it did capture me at the time, and it did horrify me, and it did really upset me for a huge amount of reasons. And they were like a lot. I wrote it out of contract because I brought out two books during COVID, and there was no shops open, and there was no airports open, and as a result, the books went nowhere. And then when the company was about to renew my contract, they were like, "Well, there's no numbers here," and that's And I was like, "Yeah, okay." So I thought, you know what? I want to do crime. I was working on the TV series at the time anyway, and I thought this is the perfect opportunity to just go and do my own thing. So I wrote it out of contract. And when I went to look for a publishing house, so many of them turned around and said that we wouldn't even look at it. Like when we were saying this is what it's about, they wouldn't even look at it because it was a dead baby. And I was like, and my agent at the time said to me, "Well, would you not think about changing?" And I said, "No, because that's what I'm passionate about. That's the story I want to tell." And I found it really interesting that in crime, there were all these companies that are really comfortable with women being beaten and violated and viciously murdered and kidnapped and killed and all. That's fine, no problem. That's totally palatable. But a baby on a beach is not acceptable. And I thought that was really interesting. And I also thought it was a way of looking away from something. And that little boy has been looked away from for 40 years. And I was like, I'm not having that. If nobody wants it, fine. But I'm not changing it. And eventually Canelo came along and said, "Yeah, we're with you." And it was really interesting. So, yeah, I mean, I write what I'm passionate about. I'm telling stories that really matter to me doing these crime books. Like, and they all do. All the stories that I'm now writing, that I'm writing the second one now. So I've been writing it all day and my head's that's why I'm a little bit, because I was like this till 2 minutes before we got on. And then I was like, oh, they're all things that matter to me. They're all people that were lost that matter. And I do a dedication to them at the start of each book. So I don't even remember what the question was.
You answered it. No. Canelo are a great publisher as well.
Yes.
We're a big fan of them in the group. There's so many authors that they put out that I just hands down buy their books.
They're so brave, you see. They're brave. They're just going, yeah, this is a really good story. And they'll allow the writer to tell the story that they want to tell. And I have huge respect for that.
let's talk about Mary as a character as well, innit? Because she is brilliant,
Oh,
isn't she?
thank you.
She knows
Well,
exactly.
Mary means a lot to me because I come from a very strong line of rebellious women. And my mother was a rebel. Her mother was a rebel. And my grandmother, my mother's mother, only had her children in her 40s. Back in a time when nobody did that. She was just one of those women. And as a result, when my mother came along, she was in her 40s. And when my mother had me, she had me in her 30s, which was highly unusual as well. My mother had gone over to London and worked. And there she met my father and they came back and she had me. And so when I was young, my grandmother was ancient. She was in her 80s, like, which is highly unusual at the time in Ireland. And my mother moved down to Kerry to live with my father. And it didn't work out. She wasn't happy. And back in the day in Ireland, people stayed. They didn't leave their husband. Certainly, if he wasn't like going to kill her. Like the women stayed, and my mother went, "Nah, I'm not doing that." So, so she took me, and we came back to Dublin. We lived with my grandmother, who's a very, very old woman, and my mother ended up getting MS, and she got sick very quickly. She had primary progressive, and she taught me how to stand up for myself because I needed to, because I was a Kerry kid with a Kerry accent in Dublin in a rough enough area with a single mother who was sick. And she imbued her strength in me. I was only 5, 6, 7. And then mom got so sick and granny got so old and sick that it was decided that I had to move. I couldn't stay with them and they had to go into homes. And so when I was 11, my aunt, Mary O'Shea from Kenmare, County Kerry, came up on the train and took me down to Kenmare to live with her and her family. And she was another very strong woman, and she was my father's sister. And her mother, my father's mother, Nora, was another very strong Kerry woman. And I went from being an only child of a sick mum to being one of 6 in Kerry. And it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. And my aunt was incredibly sharp, incredibly funny, well ahead of the times. And Mary Shea in the book looks like my aunt looked when she was young, has her sass, has her strength, and she has my mother's obstinance, and she has my mother's kind of ability to look at the world and to see the truth. My mother was very good at doing that. So she's a mixture of my 2 mothers.
Wow. I think she's very, I mean, she's very interesting. She's very outspoken throughout, isn't she?
Yeah.
In a sort of field where she's kind of mostly expected to just make the tea.
Yeah, and that they're the rebellious women in my family, that they did speak and they did fend for they were really, really ahead of their time. And that didn't, and it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. Like my aunt Mary tells a story about when my brother Dennis was born, and it was in 68 he was born, and they lived in Main Street in Kenmare. And in the book, in the Silent Ones, the town is a fictional town called Needmara, and actually in my head it's the town I grew up in, Kenmare, but instead of having a pier, it has Derrynown Beach, which is a beautiful beach that's about 15 miles down the road. But I just put them together in my head for it to all play out. And my aunt, when she had Dennis, they lived in Henry Street in Kenmare. And it was a small street full of shops, and people lived over the shops or behind the shops. And when a woman had a baby, and I kid you not, this is real, right? In the 60s in Ireland, in the early 70s, the woman was not allowed back into the Catholic Church until she was cleansed of the sin of having a child, right? Now, meanwhile, the husband is there giving it Dixie. He's grand, but she's needs to be cleansed, right, of this thing, right, of giving birth. So what would happen is the local priest would come to the house and he'd cleanse her of the sin of giving birth, and then you're welcome back into the church now. Head cases, right? So my aunt in 68 had Dennis. She nearly died twice during the delivery of Dennis. It took 11 days for that birth to happen. They had her, literally the priest had to come in. They thought she was going to die. She had a horrific time. The next thing is, a couple of weeks later, your man arrives into the door to cleanse her of her sin. And my aunt took one look at him, and she got the brush and she started brushing him out into the main street or into the Henry Street. And the whole of the town are looking out the windows as she's brushing him out the door, going, if you don't want me to see me, I won't come. Good luck to you. And out the door. And he's brushed out the door, running down the road on his bike, didn't know what to do. And all the ladies on Henry Street clapping for Mary Shea. Fair play to you, Mary. And about 2 years later, they stopped doing it. They called it churching women. And they stopped doing it in Kenmare because all the other women on the road started doing the same thing. They saw them and they'd get their brushes and they go. So that was my aunt.
I mean, she's phenomenal inspiration, isn't she?
Really?
So, but Mary sort of becomes involved through the inspector who comes in to investigate, isn't it? So he's almost like as big a part of the investigation.
Well, yeah, because in Ireland at the time, and it still happens like this. So Dublin being, the major city, the capital of Ireland, they had what would be referred to as the murder squad. I call them the Dublin boys in the thing, but it's the murder squad. And because there wasn't that many murders in Ireland at the time, like it was, if there was 14 a year, you'd be mad. You know what I mean? Like, so they would be deployed down to the country towns and villages where that happened, and they'd take over, basically. And so what I did was I used the fact that the murder squad would be brought down for something as big as this. And I used the fact that because it was a baby, that Foley, being the detective that he is, realized that actually, for the first time, Mary being a woman was an asset. Because he was like, sure, she can speak to the women. And that's what we need. We need a way in. And so Mary, who before that, and a lot of the women in reality would have been assigned typing and getting the tea, and they wouldn't have been respected, and they wouldn't have been thought to be up to the challenge. And so they would be pushed into the corner. So her career thus far had been her being pushed into the corner. And this is an opportunity that she leapt on. And what it does in the book is it puts her in a position where she can do her job, the job she's always dreamed of doing. But initially, it also sets her against her own, the women in the town, because she's seen to be, this guard, they don't trust her. The women don't trust her in the same way that the men don't. And that was real in this country as well. They were like, well, what is this? And so she faces that. But ultimately, what it does is it allows her to sit back and view this case in a way that the men would never be able to view it. And I help her to solve it.
What I found quite interesting as well is a bit where she talks about the fact that if she gets married, she would have to leave the police.
Yes. So in Ireland, up until I think it was the mid-70s, if you got married, if you worked for any government job, and you got, and some other private jobs as well, and you got married, the minute you got married, you have to leave your job. Couldn't be married. You couldn't be a married woman and work in a job. So when my mother-in-law, my husband's mother, when she got married to my father-in-law, she worked for the sweepstakes, which was a government job, and it was a brilliant job, and she was getting paid way more than her husband at the time. And as soon as she got married, she lost her job. So she went from being a higher earner to just drop into nothing. This was the same time in this country where you needed a prescription from your GP when you were a married man to get contraception. A prescription.
Wow.
They used to queue up for certain GPs in the city. There was only certain GPs that would do it. Others wouldn't. And there were certain GPs, and on a Sunday, they'd have to, with their prescription, they'd have to line up for the contraception. And this is a time when women were dying in childbirth by their droves. And then they still had to get a prescription for like, that's what you're talking about.
You've got because while you're setting up Mary where she is, there's like an interesting side story, isn't there, with her like her best friend, or initially you could sort of see them as maybe future partners.
Seamus.
Yeah, I loved him. Big fan.
Poor Seamus. Seamus was the story of so many young men and boys in Ireland, and of course around the world. I mean, everybody was kind of slow to accepting homosexuality, and in Ireland it was just an absolute no. It wasn't talked about, and even Seamus, in that book, the fact that he goes dancing every Saturday with Mary, they're using each other as cover. Mary doesn't want to get involved with any young men. She wants to hide herself away because she wants to do her job, and she knows that if she doesn't, if she falls in love, she's finished before she even starts. So she almost kind of hides away so that she could do her job and live the life that she dreamed of living, because she couldn't have it all. She couldn't do both, and she chose. And so she hid away, and she used her relationship with him to be able to go out and dance, because she wouldn't have been able to go to a club on her own back then. You wouldn't have done that. And he uses her to disguise that he's a gay man. And it works really well until he falls in love. And what happens then is the person he falls in love with happens to become embroiled in the case. And the investigation of the case risks exposing his lover and Seamus. And in a small town like that, you can't risk exposure. But also, up until 92 or 93, I think it is, in Ireland, early 90s anyway, it was illegal to be gay in Ireland. You could still go to prison. Now, a lot of people didn't, but they'd be beaten, and some did. Some faced prison. And so if the police were on the scent of you being a gay man, and you could go to prison, and there's a case that they're trying to leverage, the boys were in trouble. And it meant, in the story, it means that Mary has to cross a line to help her friend, but also cross the line because she knows what these men are doing is wrong. But she's also crossing a line that she sees them crossing all the time, and she doesn't agree with. So sometimes what's good for the goose is good for the gander, but it doesn't mean that she's comfortable or happy about it. But it's a position she finds herself in. And that's the murky world, is that in one sense, Mary, because she speaks in first person, so you get to know her, and she's ambitious, and she's straight talking, and she doesn't like lying, and she's very much down the line. But at the same time, when you push her, she will cross that line if she has to, which shows the complexity of the world that she lives in and has to thread in. To her, just the same as the reader.
I'm intrigued as to where it's going to go in book 2. So you're going to base them all on real cases?
So that's what I'm going to do is there are so look, I mean, if the series did so well that I was still writing Mary Shea in 20 years, I'm sure that we'd run out of cases, right? I would hope. I would sincerely hope. But right now, I have a 3 book deal for the Mary Shea murders. And I have 3 murders in Ireland, 3 deaths that were never we never found out what's happening, that they're ongoing. And I want to focus in on those and tell those stories in my way, using them as a leaping off position. So that's what I'm doing for the moment. And as I say, there was plenty of those cases, and they were called the Gothic murders, the Irish Gothic murders, and cases. So there's plenty to keep me going. Um, yeah, so that's the plan, Stan.
How is it? I know we've touched on it sort of being an emotive subject before, but how is it writing about them? Because they're relatively recent cases, so they'll still be family members and things alive.
So yeah, so the first case, the silent ones, there was a girl involved in her family, but they've been let go now. It's not about them, it's about the baby, and that baby has no family. So it's I wouldn't be approaching anyone, because I certainly wouldn't be trying to drag up for that girl who was brought into something that had nothing to do with her. Like, I'm telling that story in a way, but it's in a fictionalized way. So I I haven't approached that family. In the second book, I will approach um the family left behind and just say, it is a fictional book. It is using the start, whatever, but it's not about, but hopefully it will highlight. And that's what I do, is I highlight the case in the first page, go, this is still unresolved. If you have any information, this is a fictional. And then I go on and tell this is a fictional story. So I think I definitely will contact the family when the time is right, before the next book, because there is family, whereas Baby John was a different kettle of fish altogether. There is no family because we don't know who he is.
And is Mary going to be in Dublin for this book?
Yes. So for the series to work, she has to basically move to Dublin to start working with the Dublin boys, because we know that the Foley sees something in her, and he's an ambitious man, and he's also a clever man, and he's also a good man, and there are plenty of good men, you know what I mean, that lived in that time, that could see the value in somebody like Mary and what she can bring to the table. And so it's a complex relationship, and it's a difficult relationship. But at the same time, he can see the value in her. So she does go up to Dublin for the second book, and she is holding her place by a thread. And there is constantly new challenges that she ends up facing, because she is trying to work her way up in the ranks at a time when it was almost impossible. So new challenges, a new setting, and each book has a new setting, because then of course we establish her in Dublin, but then of course the next case could be down the country again, and they could all be going down and staying somewhere, and doing what the Dublin boys did, because they were always on the move for those big cases. But it's also about giving her a life that people can relate to as well. It's not just a procedural, a constant, never-ending procedural. It's definitely character focused.
Yeah, and there are moments all the way through where she develops as a character, and she starts to find her place and her people that are going to be important to her going forward, doesn't she? Like, she's making new friends,
That's right.
discovering new ways to be.
It's like she's 27 when we meet her, and it's like she's been in stasis, working that job in that small place, being held down, and kept going, kept trying, but not living. And then suddenly this poor child is found dead, and it gives her the permission to live and to fight. and to go, no, I'm not putting up with this. And it's really interesting because the real case did that for a lot of women in Ireland. A lot of women in Ireland turned around with the way the media treated that young girl, with the loss of that baby, with the patriarchy being just so brutal. And they were out in the streets and they were like, no more, no more. And I suppose that's what I do is I have this character embody those women that are like, no more. And that's how she grows in the story.
Yeah, and she uses some of the things that happen that are wrong sort of through the book to try and make them right as she goes, doesn't she? There's like sort of certain moments and she's like, we're not doing that again, we're going to do it differently.
Exactly.
Without giving, I'm trying not to give away too many spoilers, but
yeah, I know, I'm the same, and I'm like, woo.
Let's talk about your TV writing for a bit as well, because you are writing crime TV as well. So you're fully immersed in the crime.
I'm so enjoying crime. So a couple of years ago, I was writing some TV stuff, and I'd shown a sample, and I was trying to get a show away in Ireland with the Keeper Productions or Keeper Pictures. And one day out of the blue, Yvonne rings me and goes, "Hi, chicken." Hi. And she goes, listen, because my family in Kenmare, my Auntie Mary, right, O'Shea, the whole family moved to New Zealand. When I was like, so Dennis moved first, the oldest moved, and he got married over there, and we all went over pilgrimage to the wedding. And everyone was like, "You're going, jeez, it's lovely here, isn't it? We love it here in New Zealand. It's gorgeous." And then Siobhan moved there, and Brent moved there, and Carolyn moved there. And suddenly my aunt and uncle were watching their kids disappear off to the other side of the world. They had retired years before. And they said, "Sure, will we go for 6 months? And then we'll come back and blah, blah." And they went. And then Aisling was in college. She was living with me. She was the baby of the family. She was living with me in Dublin. She hated her college course. And they said, "Aisling, you come with us." And they went over for 6 months and they never came home. And so I was going over and back to New Zealand, and I'd be telling Yvonne and Keeper about me going over and back to New Zealand to see the family. So the next thing, she rings me up one night and she goes, "Listen, chicken, I have something here that you might be interested." And I said, "What was it?" She said that some producer that she had worked with when she lived in New Zealand had made contact with her and said to her, "I have an idea for a crime show. The idea is 2 Irish couple go missing in a small town in New Zealand, and an Irish cop goes over, and that's it to solve the crime, and he works with the locals." And that was it. That was the idea. That was the full idea. And she said, "Leave it with me. I think I know somebody who could do this." She rings me up and she goes, "Would you like an excuse to see your family in New Zealand?" I said, 100%. I'll do whatever you want. And then we started working on the idea and creating an actual show out of it. And the next thing is we brought on a New Zealand Maori writer, Michael Bennett. And he was originally going to come on, and I was going to write the first episode, and he was just going to consult. And the young girl who the Irish cop works with is a Maori cop in a small town with a lot of Maori characters. And I remember we went into a writer's room for a week, and Michael came into the room. And by the end of the week, I said, "Lads, there's no way this is going to work with me, just an Irish person writing a show based in New Zealand. Doesn't matter if my family live there. I don't live there. Based in New Zealand with loads populated by Maori characters. We need to co-write the first episode. And from there on, if we get it, we need to co-write the whole thing. Literally co-write every single episode so that it's not some Irish person deciding what a Maori will say or do or whatever, and vice versa. Because we've had that in Ireland. We've had writers come in and try and write for Irish people, and it's appalling. It's awful. And I didn't want to do that to another culture. And they said, "Yeah, okay, if you're happy." And he was thrilled, and we were thrilled, and we realized we could work together. And we ended up with this show. We did the pilot. They loved the pilot. We got the money. That it took ages, But we got the money and we did our first season, and I got to spend a month over in New Zealand with my family, which was incredible, working on a show. And the whole family from Kerry is lined up on the set going, this is mad, isn't it, lads? And it was just an amazing thing. Seeing my aunt Mary Shea sitting there with all the Maori characters around her giving a Dixie, and she's going, excellent. It was just such a joy. And then we got the second season, and I went back to New Zealand for another month, and we got this really great co-pro crime show with Irish characters and New Zealand characters, and we're hoping for a third series. It's just finished on BBC Two, I think, last week or maybe this week, season 2 of it. And yeah, we're hoping for a third series. So fingers crossed.
You've been asked on the stream if you're tempted to live in New Zealand as well.
Oh, I remember when they moved over first. I had just got married, so my aunt and uncle waited till a month after my wedding day, and then they moved. And the first couple of years, every time I go over, they're like, now, Anna, we're going to show you a bit of property over here. I think you'd really like it. We go and look at these properties, and I'd be like, lads, I married a Dublin man who literally, his sisters made a joke the night before we got married, saying the priest would have to say, Anna, do you take Donal and his ma to be your lawfully wedded husband, right? So there was no way Donal was going anywhere as long as his mother and father were alive, and that was okay by me. And it's funny that one of the people, I think you said Donna, mentioned the Last Days of Rabbit Haze. The mother in the Last Days of Rabbit Haze was written after my mother-in-law Terry, who I adored. So we were never leaving Dublin. We were always going to be there. And also my voice as a writer is in Dublin. So in Ireland. Do you know what I mean? It's an Irish voice. So if I had moved over there 20 years ago, I would have lost my voice for sure, you know. So would I like to think that maybe someday I'd have a little lock up there? And we're definitely, Donal just lost his dad during the summer. We lost Terry, his mum, 9 years ago. And as a result, now it's my time, and we've decided that every Christmas will be in New Zealand with my family. So I'd love to think that maybe someday, but not for a long time. Not as long as I'm working, and I want to keep my voice very authentically Irish. And to do that, I have to stay here and live it.
There is a bit of a rise in Irish voices in crime fiction. Currently, I think, isn't there? It seems to be becoming a more prominent voice.
Yeah, I think there was always a lot in crime, but you see, it's market dictated, because realistically, there's a lot of people like me who have been writing for years and moved into crime because that's where the demand is. And like, while I was lucky enough to find my crime voice when I was working on TV, and then a love for it as a result. And then, of course, the podcast happened, and I was like, oh my God, this idea, I won't let me go. But there is that market thing of, well, what are people buying? What do the audience want? And if you're a writer, some writers will stick to one genre, and that is it for the rest of their days. That's what they're doing, and that's what they can do, and that's it. And some of the rest of us are like, I can write this. I've written a kid's book, you know, because I had an idea and I presented it to my editor, and they were like, that's a children's book. That's not an adult book. And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, that's a kid's story. You can't tell that. And I was like, yeah, well, I am telling it. So I told it, and yeah, it was a kid's story, and I sold it as a kid's story. And then I went and I did a hospital show in Holby, and I loved doing that, and that I liked that. And then I wrote my own film for Rabbit Haze because I wanted to tell the film. So I had to learn how to do that. And I want to tell different stories, and I don't want to be stuck in a box. I want to be able to go and literally disappear into the world of my creation and not be told, but that doesn't fit on that shelf. When I told my French marketing girl who I love, Catherine. I love her so much. And the French love when you go over, and I'm always going over for book fairs. And I was over at a book fair, and my fiction does very well in France. And I said to her, you know, the next thing I'm doing is a crime book. And she nearly had a breakdown. She's like, what do you mean? A crime? We spent the last 10 years putting you on the shelf. And this is the shelf. And now you want another shelf? I was like, yeah. And she was like, Anna, do not, like, we can't, and it won't. And, you know, and she was really scared that I wouldn't get a deal in France because they built me as this, and now I want to be that. And I just signed a deal with France. So, you know, sometimes you just have to do what you want to do and not worry about what's going to happen or who wants it. And yes, there is a market here, but they might not want you. So you've absolutely 100% go, that's where market is, but that market might not, they might not want Anna McPartlin. They might not like Anna McPartlin. But if the story is strong enough, and if you really want to tell it, you really want to spend time with these characters, do it, you know, and then see what happens. And if it doesn't work, do something else.
I think people who are real readers and like really, really love books will find people whose writing style they like, and will sometimes take a chance on things, even if it's not a genre that they would normally read, if they really like an author. Yeah. If I would read it, if my favourite authors, I would read anything they wrote, whatever genre it was in.
Which is amazing. And look, there's different types of readers. Yeah, there's different types of readers, there's different types of writers. You know, we all exist in this little pool, and it is what happens. And that's what I'm saying. If you love to read anything, brilliant. I love to write anything, and I will give it a go. You know, I will give it a go, because why not? Because the joy is telling the story. And if a story captures my imagination, it doesn't matter what genre I'm told it is. In my head, it's just my story that I want to get on the page. And right now, I'm really, really enjoying spending time with Mary Shea and in that world, in that time, and exploring it, and exploring the things that really upset me when I was growing up, you know, and kind of finding the voice that my mother had, that my aunt had, that they inspired in me. But at the time I was very young and I didn't have that voice then. So now through Mary Shea, I do.
Yeah, there's a very strong feminist voice throughout it, isn't there? That again, I would imagine a bit like the content of the crime might put some people off, but I think it entirely fits who is doing the investigating and the tone of the book, if you know what I mean. It's meant to be there. It needs to be there.
100%. Which is why, you know, when people are saying, could we do a different crime? No. And there will be people that won't want to read that, and they'll be happy to read some woman getting raped to death, and that'll be fine, and fair play. Off you go. You'll never have that in one of my books. That's not something I'm interested in. I think there's enough of that. Do you know what I mean? I want to tell stories based on things that have happened that have moved me. That, yeah, I want my readers to be moved, and not for that person who died just to be a device. Do you know?
Yeah, I like what you were saying about your voice being authentically set there as well, because I feel like the sense of place is really deeply rooted.
Yeah.
In the story.
Yeah, and it's kind of I have this, because I came from a city. So, like, my mother was from Dublin and my father was from Kerry. And when I was born in Dublin, and then we moved straight down to Kerry. Kind of like when I was 2, we went to Kerry. So that's what I remembered. And then when we were 5, Mum brought me back on the train to Dublin. And then I lived in Dublin, and I went to school in Dublin. And then when I was 11, I was brought back down to Kerry. And so I have this thing where I'm half Dublin and I'm half Kerry, and I'm like a stick of rock. I mean, it's right down the middle. And I always say that, you know, my heart is in Kerry, but my soul is Dublin. And that's the thing, and that's what I love to balance in the stories that I tell. Rabbit Haze is Dublin. It's my Dublin voice, it's my Dublin soul. And Mary Shea is my Kerry heart and my Kerry voice. And that's what's exciting about being a writer, is being able to inhabit those worlds, revisit them, and share the love I have for both those worlds with the reader.
One of the things I like to ask everyone when I do these chats is, what have you read recently and really enjoyed?
The Night I Killed Him. It's a new one by Jill. What's her surname? Is it Purdue? And oh, I inhaled it. It was brilliant. Um, it's it's based in Dunleary, which is a small kind of fishing village in Dublin, in South Dublin. And they have, they have the yacht club and they've all of that. So you've got the people with a few quid there as well. And it's the idea is that this girl who grew up there, and she's an influencer, and she's married to this horrific, horrible man. I'm not giving anything away. I'm not giving a spoiler away by just saying the minute you meet him, you go, my God, he's disgusting. And he controls her, and he's just this horrible guy. And you realize very quickly that he was her brother's best friend, and her brother died whatever amount of years before, 10 years before. And basically, when we meet her, she's in this horrible marriage, living this idealized life as an influencer. They have a young child, a little boy, lovely little fella who's very clingy to his mum. And you can understand why when the onion is peeled on the father. He's just this really, really dark, menacing force. And you realize that when we meet her, the body of her brother is discovered in the water. And he's been there for years and years and years. He'd been tied down, released, and this body appears. And he had gone missing, and the search had been completed, and blah, blah, blah. And everyone had thought he'd fallen off a boat on a night when he was drinking. And basically, when the body is revealed, it's clear he was murdered. And so the murder hunt begins. And this is my first of Jill's books, but apparently this detective duo, has been in books before. So now I'm going to go back and find the other ones and start reading. I'm going to get the first one and start reading from the start. And basically they're on the case, and we have to unravel what happened that night, and how it's informed this poor cow. And it's gripping. It's a gripping read. So yeah, I've just finished that.
It sounds gripping.
Yeah, no, it's really good.
Sounds like a case for Mary as well. Like,
it's a very different. It's a very different type of book, actually. Like, it's crime, but realistically, you're really. It's very, very. It's like people always say I'm really dark, and I don't think I'm that dark. Just like, I don't think I am. But we go, oh, you're very dark. I'm like, am I that dark? Whereas I found this one quite really dark now, really dark. Because again, for me, it's a woman being abused to a level that I find incredibly uncomfortable. You see, we all have different gauges, don't we? It's really interesting. So yeah, it's really good though.
There's another...
Get it after the silent ones, okay?
Well, yeah, obviously. Someone has said that they like dark books. Laura has said she highly recommends your Rabbit Haze books if you want to break.
Oh, thanks, Laura.
She says they're very emotional though.
Yeah. So Rabbit Haze, the last days of Rabbit Haze does exactly what it says on the tin. You meet a woman on the last 8 days of her life. So the book opens with her mother driving her to the hospice, and they're both in a state of denial, and the family is in a state of denial, and they're all trying to pretend that she's going to get out, that it's rehab, because a lot of the hospices in Ireland have a rehab facility as well. And they have to come to terms with the fact that she's dying, and her young daughter is 11 in it. And it's about saying goodbye. It's about her letting go of life. And it's about her finding Juliet, her new family. Obviously, her family is her family, but like, who's she going to go with? Because all the family want her, and they're having a fight over her. And it's like, who does she go with? And of course, there's a load of that in my life when my aunt took me, because my grandmother wanted me and my aunt, and so, and I understand what it is to take care of somebody and all that. So again, it takes parts of my life and it just fictionalizes them and turns them into a completely different thing, and fictionalizes and goes, what happens if it was like this? So I take what I know as a person, and that's why it gets really emotional, because although the situation is totally fictional, I actually know, I know what it is to lose, right? I know what it is to lose a mother. I know what it is to be a carer. I know what it is, for a mother to make those decisions. I know all those things, so I can talk about them. And so that's why it's such an emotional read, I suppose. Yeah.
Although, I mean, I've not read that one. I will go back and find it. But I feel like the silent ones had moments of being quite emotional. There are
Yeah.
certainly times when you're reading how some people are treated, or you're reading sort of certain scenes where it's definitely tugging on your emotions.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting for me when I read crime. The thing that I find really interesting is that a lot of crime, you don't have that emotional connection, like particularly the really procedurally driven crime, which is a kind of a subset genre of itself. That it's like, it's about the cops, and it's about a puzzle. It's not about a being or a family. They're just the device. She was murdered. Forget her now. What it is it's this guy has to find out, or this girl has to find out what happened. And it's about them and how they're tricked up, and the twists and the turns or whatever. But there's no real emotional engagement in the fact that a human being is the reason we're all here. And so for me, I can't write something without being present in that this person has died. This person had a life and it was taken. And what does that do to the family? And what does that do to society? And what does it say about us? And what does it say about the characters that are there on the scene and how they're feeling? And when I speak to police, I mean, real police who see this all the time are scarred, absolutely battle scarred, and carry that weight of those stories and those people and what happened to them. And, they're, depending on the type of person that they are, it affects them in different ways. And I wanted to tell that story, that very real, idea of a person who sees something like that and takes it on board, and what that means, what's happening here. It's not just a mystery. It's not just a puzzle. It's a person.
Which is, I mean, I'm thinking like right at the opening of the book, so this isn't really a spoiler, because they find the baby's body on the beach, and there's a scene where the priest comes, and for me that sort of set the tone of how the rest of the book was going to go, because that was a really like emotional moment.
Yeah, it is, because and here's the thing. In Ireland that happens. It's also factual, so it's emotional. It's not me just writing it to go, oh, it'd be great now if Priest came in, that'll be, it's not, that's what happened, that's part and parcel. So to the point where, the priest to be there and trodden all over the bloody crime scene and sprinkling holy water and feckin' wrecking them. Like, that's what happened in Ireland. Do you know what I mean? Like, when a woman was killed in West Cork, a French woman was murdered in the 90s. And at the time, PC Plods over here had the priest before the pathologist. So the priest and the lads were all standing over the body. And as a result, there was a huge amount of DNA lost because that's what happens. And so what I want to do is tell a crime story, to have it unravel the mystery and the twist and the this and the that and the other and all of those things, but put the characters and the people and the situation and what terrible thing has happened at the center of it and how that impacts people and why these things happen. I want to explore all of it.
Which is, I think, what makes it such an interesting read. And it's probably why people are going to go away and buy it, hopefully, after this chat. We've got about 2 minutes left, so just remind people what they're going to go away and buy.
The Silent Ones. Here it is. Look at me with my big poster. That's what she looks like. The Mary Shea Murders. It's the first, and it's a crime that can't be forgiven, a community that won't forget. And there she is, the beach. And yeah, it's my first crime, and I hope it's not my last. And I really hope that people enjoy it. If they do pick it up, I really hope they enjoy it.
Have the reviews been coming in quite well for it?
Oh my God, unbelievable. So far it's 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. And I think even on Amazon, my agent FaceTimed me on the Thursday, literally the first day it was out, said they're up on Amazon already. Out of 5 reviews, 4 of them were 5 stars, 1 of them was 4 stars. So I can't ask for more than that. And all the kind of book influencers so far coming through my feed are all 5 stars. So that's insane. And I hope it keeps coming. We'll see.
Brilliant. That's really good to hear. And I hope
it's unbelievable.
Because I hope that the series has a long future.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I do too. I love spending time. And you know what was really sweet was my aunt, I sent it to my aunt, you know, and she sent me this video of her just reacting to this story that's, you know, this character that's looks like her and talks like her, and she's so excited, and it's like she was laughing, going, "People will think I was a guard." They'll all be saying that Mary Shea, that guard. So it's a joy for us all. So if I could keep her going, I think my aunt would be thrilled.
Yeah, and I mean, it'd be a joy to have you back with us another time.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thanks for taking the time, and thanks for reading. And I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Just before we finish, is your book on audiobook?
Yes. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Good. Sorry, it was just a question on the stream. So if that's going to get you a sale, let's answer it.
Yeah. So any way you want it, you can find it. And I'm on Instagram. You can buy it on the link on Instagram. Anna McPartlin. There I am, selling it away on Instagram.
Brilliant. Thank you so
God
much.
love me.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. Bye, lads.